Hello friends and welcome back, it's Chala, and today we are hopping along for the Scrap and Stamp February Galentines blog hop, and we're going to make this fun stepped up Ziegfeld card. I have a piece of cardstock here that is 11 inches long by 5.5 inches tall, and what we're going to do is we're going to set up our Ziegfeld card by scoring at 5.5 inches, which is in the middle, and then we're going to score again at the 2 3/4 inches mark. And how we do this is we fold that piece of cardstock in half and then fold that left piece back on itself in half again. All right, you can see the Ziegfeld feature right there. And then there's an extra element that we can add to this, and that is this little piece here. Now I have this, it's measuring 11 inches long, just like our first piece did. This is 1.5 inches tall. And then I'm going to flip it around so that's easier to kind of see. We're basically doing the same scoring we did on our card base, so at that 5.5 inch mark, and again at the 2 3/4 inch mark. But what we need to do is turn it around in order for it to work in the folding process with the card. So again, we're just going to score along those marks and fold it back on itself. I'm going to flip it over here and fold it again. And it's just really folding it the opposite way as our card, so that when we attach it to our card, it will open properly. And I'll show you that in a minute here. I'll just bring the base back, and this will just simply lay on top, and we'll secure the two ends to the card so that when we pull it open, it has that little stepped out feature. Now that little stepped out feature, you can have that different sizes in terms of how tall it is, but the length of it needs to be the same length as the original card base. Alright, so for my card today, I am using the Friends at First Sip stamp set by My Favorite Things, as well as the City Stacks by Concord and Ninth, and I just laid out my plan that I had there. I stamped with some Memento Black Tuxedo ink because I'll do some Copic coloring with these images, and then I created some masks with my masking paper. I'll lay this over top, and then that way I can do the ink blending on the background. So I sometimes like to plan my scenes out by laying my little images out, and you saw that I had already stamped and cut out the characters from that Friends at First Sip set. Again, this is a technique that I use. I like to kind of lay the images out to get an idea of how I want my scene to look. I get the idea in my head, and then it just is a lot easier for me to plan out if I have the images there, and then I can move them around and see how I want the final scene to play out. So I'm just laying this masking paper, like I said, down on top of these stamped images. Now when I did the masks, I use actually stays on ink when I stamp out my masks, and that's just so it doesn't smudge when I'm using the masks itself. I find that I get ink on my fingers otherwise. I also have pulled out the cloud stencil from My Favorite Things, and I'm using just my picket fence blending brush, and what is it? I think it is Broken China and Tumbled Glass Distress ink, and I'm just moving the stencil around and blending in those inks to get the sky image that I like. So again, this takes a bit of time. I find using the picket fence brushes a lot easier than the standard foam ink blending tools. It's a little easier on my wrists, and I seem to get a nicer blend, I think, personally. But if the foam ones work for you, then definitely go ahead and use that. So I'm again using going back and forth between that tumbled glass and the Broken China, and I'll link to all the materials that I use over at the blog, so make sure you go ahead and check that out. Just going back and forth, trying to deepen the look of that sky scene. And then as we get further along here, I'll just show you just a little bit more of how I do that. I turn the stencil as I go just to get some of that different cloud look to it. And that'll add a really great dimension and look to the scene of the card, so it doesn't look so flat. Alright, once I get that all done, you can see here I did use some post-it notes just for some extra masking here, and this is my favorite part, is just pulling up the mask and looking at how it turned out underneath. Look at that, so great. And then I'm just using my craft pick to loosen up that masking, and you can go ahead and you can either toss that masking paper away, or you can just adhere it to the packaging of your stamps and use it again. I really like this City Stacks set as well. It's really versatile. Again, you can mix and match your stamp sets when you create scenes, and it really just seemed to work very well for this card idea that I had. So there you go, I've got the sky all done. Now what we need to do is go ahead and get that grass put in. And so I'm using my my Wendy Vecchi Make Art Station for this ink blending. I like to use this because of that long magnetic ruler. It really holds down my work nicely when I'm doing ink blending. It doesn't kind of move around on me. And then this is, of course, the mowed lawn. What other distress ink would you use for lawn but the mowed lawn? You can again add another color if you want to add a little bit more depth and dimension to your project. And I'll just quickly do my ink blending on the bottom portion here. I did add the masks back in just to make sure that I didn't get any ink on the areas that I wanted to Copic color. Now this card really didn't take too long to make. I think I spent longer thinking about how I wanted it to come together than it actually did take to put it together. So that's great when it comes to these cards. It looks like you spent a long time doing it, but it was a very quick process. So just finishing up my blending. And I really love this blog hop idea of celebrating our girlfriends. Sometimes we get caught up in the fact that Valentine's has got to be about romantic love, but I think it's important to as well celebrate the love of our friends and love of our neighbors. There's so many facets to love, so I like this hop idea for sure. And remember to comment on all the blog posts as we go along here for your chance to win a gift certificate. Now I'm just bringing in my Copic black liner to extend this line of the stamp to make it look a little more natural, look like that it was all one stamp set. And again, that's another thing you can do with your stamps, is just adding a few lines into it to extend that scene. So making sure my Copic was working, and I'll just add in those lines. Okay, I think everybody I know has officially texted or called me as I'm trying to do this voiceover, so I apologize for the interruption here. You can see that I've gone ahead and extended those lines. One thing to note on this cardstock piece is that I have not yet scored it. I've gone ahead and done the coloring. I did not score it yet because I wanted to get all the coloring and ink blending done first so that I didn't have to worry about coloring or blending over top of those score lines. Adding in our stepped up piece here, this is the 1.5 inches. You can again make that part bigger, but what you need to remember is the length of it needs to stay the same as your card base. So I'm just using some brown cardstock here with the Lawn Fawn Meadow Borders stitch die set. Again, we're looking at our score lines being the 5.5 inches and 2 3/4 inches, and you're going to be scoring on the right side of that extended piece. Now, before I do that, I want to show you again how we score the card base, and I'm going to speed this up a bit. So we're going to score at the 2 3/4 inch mark. So right there, and we're going to score that down. And then we're going to score again at the 5.5 inch mark. And then what we'll do is we will fold the piece in half. I'm just going to make that score line a little deeper. So you fold it in half, and then really just press down that fold. And then we need to fold back that piece that we scored at the 2 3/4 mark. And again, just using my bone folder to reinforce that fold line. And then you can see that our seam matches up nicely here, and then when we pull it out it extends it. I really like that. I think that's fun. So bringing back in that stepped up piece, talking about where we're going to score it. So again, we want to score on the right hand side of this piece. So we're going to score it at the 5.5 inch mark, so that's in half. I'm going to turn it upside down to do that 2 3/4 inch scoring, just because my board isn't long enough. All right, so again, we will fold that in half, and then just reinforce that fold line, and then fold that 2 3/4 score line back on itself, and then just reinforce. And then when we lay this onto our card, we're going to secure it on the left and right hand side of that stepped up piece only, so that it opens up with a card. Now to secure this down, you can use liquid adhesive. I'm going to just quickly use my tape runner here to show you what it'll look like. What I will want to do though is make sure that I do my sentiment before I fully secure it down. So just to give you a quick idea of how this piece works, I'll just temporarily tack it down and show you how it folds nicely. Lining up the edges there. So there you can see how it pops out that seam. Now I'm going to quickly just remove this. I do want to get that sentiment on top. It's a lot easier to do when it is not adhered to the card. And just kind of looking at bringing in my little element, my little person here, making sure I have enough room for that sentiment of where I want to stamp it. I'll be stamping with my Tim Holtz platform. This is a nice big stamp positioner. I do have the Stamp Perfect as well for my smaller stamps and objects, but this one I wanted to use the bigger one. And I'll be using a anti-static powder bag just to make sure when you're doing your Versamark stamping for heat embossing, you want to make sure that that embossing powder doesn't stick all over your project. So I'll bring in the powder bag there and just treat my cardstock. And I have heat embossed with white embossing powder. That's all set up, and now I can go ahead and adhere this back down onto our card base. The sentiment that I chose is "You are the cream to my coffee." I think that's so much fun, especially if you go for coffee with your girlfriends. It'll be a nice fun card. So again, just using my tape runner for this. Like I said, you can use liquid adhesive if you like, but this seemed to work well for me. You want to, again, just making sure that you are adhering it only to that portion of the card on the left hand side, that 2 3/4 portion, as well as the 2 3/4 portion of the pop out piece on the right hand side here. I hope that makes sense, but if you adhere adhesive all to the back of that popped out piece, your card won't open and close properly. So it's just on the edges that you want to put your adhesive. And again, I find you really want to make sure you're lining this up really well to the edges of the card so that it folds. Alright, so we got that down. Now it's time to add our little characters and a few more little fun elements on. I'll pop this little gal here up with some foam squares. I think that would be nice to give it again a little more interest and dimension to the card. So just using some foam squares on the back of her. If you add any elements to that popped up folded piece, the stepped up piece as I like to call it, just making sure again that if it's in the middle of the card that you're not adhering it directly to the card base. Just making sure it opens and closes nicely. And for the right hand side, I've got the little coffee cart and this gal who's got her cup of coffee. I'm just trying to figure out where I want that coffee cart to go. It just takes me a little bit. I wasn't sure if I wanted to adhere anything behind the hill and behind that dark hill so that you could see it when you opened it, but I thought, you know, I'll just keep it here on the right hand side where everyone can see it. I wasn't sure, should I have it peeking out behind there? But in the end I liked it better on the right hand side. So this, I'll just use my tape runner and quickly adhere it down. And then when I get this other character adhered down, that's really it. I've got some space there on the right hand side that I can write my message to the recipient, maybe with some like a white gel pen. I think that would be fun. And look at this cute little scene we've created. It didn't take a lot of time, it was a lot of fun, but it's just that added extra piece to your Ziegfeld card. It really makes a difference, and it just really adds something to the card, makes it more unique. So here's a close-up look of that card all completed. I really like how using those two different stamp sets I was able to create this really kind of fun city and home feel, you know, going to the city with friends for coffee. Again, I'm trying to step up my envelopes, so I did do some stamping, and then on the flap of the envelope I put "We were friends at first sip." Thanks so much for joining me for the Scrap and Stamp Galentines blog hop. Be sure to head over to my blog to check out all the materials, as well as links to the other blog participants. Also, check out these other videos, and remember to hit that subscribe button. Thanks so much and have a great day.